Jane Harrison's Buildings Roman novel Becoming Coralie Lewis follows the story of a young Aboriginal girl growing up in the 1980s, a time where Australia was riddled with much prejudice and racism towards Aboriginal people. Coralie navigates her way through many formative experiences, such as moving from her rural town upbringing to the big city of Melbourne and discovering her biological family and the cultural shift that comes with this. Harrison uses setting, characterization, and structure to communicate her message that one's sense of identity is complex and not fixed. The unique structure of this book refers to the way the novel is broken up into three parts: Coralie's perspective, Sherry, Coralie's biological mother's perspective, and Coralie's perspective again. By using anaphora in the line, I didn't cry when the labour pains, ... I didn't cry when she was taken, ... I didn't cry when I signed the papers, ... I didn't cry on the first anniversary, ... Harrison shows the brutal experiences Sherry went through growing up in a judgmental and prejudiced community and how they shaped her identity as a young woman. Throughout the novel, there are a few flashbacks to the 1960s following Sherry and how she met Charlie. By using a non-linear timeline, we are able to see these things in the same perspective she's experiencing things through, allowing us to better understand her and see that the reason she gave up Coralie is much more complex than readers originally thought. Harrison beautifully shows the change of identity of the characters through the structure of the novel. The settings in this novel are a key narrative feature used by Harrison. The rural small town where Coralie grew up and the contrasting big Melbourne city where Coralie has to navigate her way through uncharted territory. The author uses dialogue when two characters are speaking rudely about an Aboriginal person in front of Coralie, but turn to her and say, "We don't mean you, love." People knew her family and thus didn't make such generalizations about her. This would have had a significant impact on her identity as an Aboriginal girl, being excluded from these things as she wasn't the same kind of Aboriginal as the people being prejudiced against. Things drastically change for her when she moves to Melbourne, and for the first time, people don't know her white family. By using a simile in the line, "It was like a market at closing time," Harrison shows the drastic difference between Coralie's rural hometown and the big city she just moved into. It allows us to see her identity shifting as she gets used to the big city lifestyle. We really see the change in Coralie's identity as the settings in her life change. Harrison's use of the characterization is another narrative feature that really helps us understand how these characters feel and how their identity changes through the novel. In the book, when Coralie says, "I was the little black duck that didn't know how to quack," the author uses a metaphor of Coralie being a black duck to show how she feels outcast from the society she's in. Not being able to quack shows how she feels like she doesn't have a voice. At the beginning of the novel, Coralie doesn't identify as an Aboriginal. She thinks that she's different and other Aboriginal people just aren't putting enough effort in, even though deep down, Coralie knows she too is Aboriginal and she can't change that. Harrison uses first-person perspective in the line, "I was racist," so we are able to get a proper understanding of what was being felt and said from Coralie's point of view. In this part of the book, Coralie reflects on her old ways, thinking and realizing how much she's changed through her experiences. Throughout the book, Coralie went through a lot, and that has helped shape her identity and how she sees herself. In summary, Jane Harrison has masterfully employed the narrative features of structure, setting, and characterization to support the idea that identity isn't fixed. Through Coralie, Harrison shows what it's like to be a young Aboriginal woman growing up in the 1980s. Through Coralie's perspective, we see how she developed from someone who was sheltered and doesn't understand Aboriginal people into someone who experienced the adversity of an Aboriginal person. The novel Becoming Coralie Lewis shows us that identity is fluid and constantly being shaped by our experiences. Bam!